Oh my Tris, there have been all kinds of anniversaries recently, and perhaps one of the most important ones in a few ways, I would say, is Super Mario RPG turning 25 today, at least in Japan. That's right, it came out on March 9th, 1996 in Japan. It came out a couple months later in the Americas. Wow, I cannot believe that, because I remember the lead up to this game, being so excited for it, playing it, loving it, and now here we are 25 years later, having played it countless times over the years. And Tris, I believe you're a big fan of this game as well, is that right?
Yeah, I've played through this game about 3 times. I never got a chance to get to it until it hit Virtual Console, but since that time, I've put about 3. I think I have a file I think I have a 4th file like halfway through from a few years ago. I love the Mario RPGs, and this kickstarted them all.
I feel like Mario RPG really gets lost in kind of the conversation of Mario in general. Like, it's overshadowed by the mainline games, by the Paper Mario games, the Mario and Luigi games, and that's partially because, like, Paper Mario, I think, was basically the spiritual successor to this game, but then we had a spin-off to the series, Mario and Luigi, which also took elements from this, and we wouldn't have either of those without Mario RPG.
I guess we could say Paper Mario is a spiritual successor, because I think it actually started as a proper sequel.
It did,
to this
that's
game.
right, before it was renamed to Paper Mario. And it basically was effectively a reboot. It was almost the same story, to some degree. It was simpler, but where you're going around collecting stars in order to repair the Star Haven instead of Star Road, in order to allow, I think, for wishes to be made again, I think, right? Was that
basically, yeah.
So it's
basically.
Pretty much exact same premise, only simplified. There's no... we don't have, we have brand new partner characters, but there's no returning characters in Mario RPG, or at least no returning original characters, I should say. And they don't really even acknowledge the events of Mario RPG, which is kind of sad to me, because again, Mario RPG just kind of gets lost in the realm of Mario, like to the point where even though Geno did have the first and only cameo in the original Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, in the remake of that game, which came out a few years ago on 3DS, he was taken out. Poor Geno! Or actually, I guess he also had a cameo in Smash Brothers as a costume. I barely count that. That's offensive to me. And yeah, I feel like Mario RPG, I think it deserves better, Tris. And that's why I want to talk with you today about Mario RPG as a game, as a legacy, what it means for Mario. And I'd probably play this game myself. I would wager at least a dozen times. I've played this game so many times as a kid. It's probably been a while since I've had a full playthrough, but I played a little bit of it today just to remind myself of it. And I was instantly taken back to playing it for the first time and just being impressed by what this game is. Like, the game opens with an impressive cinematic of, like, I say cinematic because this game felt cinematic. You see, like, Bowser swooping from the sky, pick up Princess Peach and, like, carry her away. And then within the first 10 minutes, you're beating on Bowser. You're taking on what feels like the final boss. Like, this is Bowser. You're kicking his butt after having a conversation with him, by the way. Bowser can talk in this game. And it just feels epic. Of course, once you beat Bowser, beating quotes, that's when we get the full scale of this adventure, which is Smithy, this giant sword coming in from the sky, crashing down in Bowser's castle, sending Bowser, Peach, and Mario all flying to different corners of the world. And it really just sets up like what is a wild and crazy adventure. Like, it's like, this is Mario at a scale we've never seen before.
Yeah, and it's crazy to look back. It's wild to look back at it and really see how, even still to this day, it's still rather unique. Like we mentioned, Paper Mario took a lot of the similar story beats, but this whole adventure is still very unique to itself, and that's part of what makes it so great to revisit even all these years later.
I can't drive home how wild this game was when it came out. The idea of making a Mario RPG was nuts. Like, no one could even really quite imagine how that was going to work. And having Square, of all companies, making this game, like, who was famous for Final Fantasy, being given the rights to Mario to work with Nintendo on turning Mario into this full-length RPG, role-playing adventure, is just completely wild. Because one of the things that they did as part of this, which hadn't been done at that point, was they had to flesh out the Mushroom Kingdom. What is the Mushroom Kingdom? That's something that hadn't been explored outside of, like, the cartoons and comic books. That's something we hadn't seen at all really in the games, aside from, like, maybe the world map. So they had to take this, contextualize it, make new characters for it, figure out how, like, the towns work, like what would townsfolk be doing and saying in this, what's it like to go on an adventure and buy things things at stores, to just have like these different mini games and different side quests. Like they offered a view of the Mushroom Kingdom we had never seen before.
And I think that's one of the strongest points of this game, in all honesty, because it's, in my opinion, still one of the best depictions of this whole kingdom. And not even just the Mushroom Kingdom, but everything in between, from it to Bowser's Castle and your whole journey that you go on. All these different kind of toads with all these different markings, and these different kind of NPCs and people. Mole Town, like the town of like enemies, where they're not enemies, they're just settling down. There's a whole little thing there where you run into someone that worked for Bowser's army that retired,
right,
and Bowser like wishes them well in life, and it's like there's all these little things that even now in more modern Mario RPGs you don't get things like that, and it affects you in such a way because it's this world building that Mario should absolutely have more of. And back then, when you compare to all the other classic games we had at the time, that was like unheard of for this kind of series. Nobody thought they would do that kind of thing. And to see now, 25 years later, in some regards, it still hasn't been topped with that kind of world building. That's just a lot.
Yeah, I mean they've had similar attempts, as we already touched on. Paper Mario and then Mario and Luigi's. They've had their own spin on things, but I think I agree with you with that. I think this might be the single best, most fleshed out, the most fleshed out, realized version of the Mushroom Kingdom we've seen. And that's why I think it's still, based on my limited playtime today and over the years, I feel like it holds up remarkably well. I guess you could argue the 3D art style probably hasn't aged the best. I still think it looks fine, and I think I remember back in the day it being extremely impressive. This was basically the Donkey Kong Country of Mario, where they used like CGI workstations to pre-render these Mario creations. And while the high-res versions we saw in the media art looked a little weird at 16-bit resolutions, it looks completely fine. And they really kind of helped bring this world to life, where it felt like, it kind of felt like, in a way, like a proto Mario 64, at least in terms of like, trying to offer this sense of scale and this 3D world you can roam around. Because again, basically every Mario up to that point was two-dimensional.
Yeah, and I think it's still really charming, and I think even though it could be argued whether it's aged well or not, I think it still holds this kind of charm that is unique to it. I mean, look at characters like Bowser and what's his name, Brewster? Like
Booster.
Not Brewster. Booster.
Yeah.
Close.
Animal Crossing.
The Animal Crossing character. Yeah. Like the two of them are so expressive in this art style. I can only imagine how more expressive they would be in something else, but they managed to make them really expressive despite limitations and the way this works. And Mallow too, with like his little crying, his little like cheering, like it works really nicely, and it's just charming to look back on.
Yeah, you touched on the expressiveness of the characters, which is really interesting because on the one hand, the models are kind of static looking, like this is still early CG, but on the other hand, they take it to a degree that is so fun because, especially in Mario's case, Mario doesn't talk in this game. He only nods his head and that's about it when it comes to like making
and pantomimes.
Choices. That's what I was gonna say. He pantomimes when it comes to like conveying story details, and it's so well done. Where he'll like adopt the form of a character and do these like simple animations to tell the story. It's remarkably effective. Like you can tell what he's doing. Like when he uses Bowser to when he acts as a sword and Bowser is Bowser's castle and he comes crashing in on Bowser's back to show like Smithy coming in. It's just so great. This game has such a sense of humor, as you were saying. Particularly with how it breaks it effectively breaks the fourth wall at points. They even bring in like real world pop culture stuff that I don't think Mario really quite dabbles into the same degree before. Like they reference Bruce Lee in this game, which
that's right.
We haven't seen since. There's a couple other references like that too, and getting back to the something you were touching on earlier, like with the monster and Bowser like talking to it as on a more like human level in quotes. Something that Eric touches on in the live chat right now, which our patrons are partaking in, is that this is the first time you officially in the games at least join up with Bowser. Like he's on your side. Like it turns, you fight him at first, but then he comes around when he realizes you guys have a common enemy. You gotta take on Smithy, and that's something they played with again over the years, such as in Bowser's Inside Story and a few other games, to my recollection. But like this is the game that started it. Like so many things started here, including elements of the active time system they had or something.
The action commands.
Action commands, thank you. Which were most specifically basically lifted in Paper Mario with a very similar system, although Mario and Luigi uses something similar as well. It kind of takes it to a bit more of an analog take on it, but both have elements of things that started here. And what Mario RPG really did well is it kind of like took the idea of an RPG, kind of boiled it down to like, what's the simplest form of this that we can offer? Maybe a degree above what Paper Mario did, and just infused it with Mario. Like it feels true to what an RPG is, while being true to what Mario is, to the point that there were no random battles. You could see enemies on the map, which thank God, I love that. The real-time commands or the action commands make it feel a little bit more Mario-esque. There's actual platforming in this game, to a limited amount, but there are puzzle or challenges in this game, and there are also puzzles too. It feels a little bit Zelda-esque at points because you have to solve these interesting brain teasers, like in the sunken ship has these amazing puzzles on a per room basis that you have to figure out in order to work your way through. It's just the atmosphere of this game too is just so great at points. It just ties everything together, and just everything is just works.
Yeah, no, it really does work, and I love how each area, even though many of them are self-contained, it's still believable to be within the same world. And it works, so sometimes these puzzles may seem odd, but it still makes sense to what's going on, especially if it's a puzzle set up by, the Smithy gang coming in and trying to take over.
Right.
I do want to touch upon with the battle system, too. Going on a bit with the charm that I mentioned, I love that each of the different kind of attacks the players, or the different player characters can get, all feel true to the characters. Like, Bowser can swing around a little chain chomp, or I believe this, I'm pretty sure he can just pick up Mario and throw him, which is also really funny.
The hurling glove, I think.
Yeah. Like, there's so many, fun little moves that are so true to the characters, like Peach with the frying pan, or the giant, slapping glove, or Mario with the Koopa shell. Like, there's so many different things that work for each character that adds a ton of variety, and unlike a lot of other RPGs at the time, it actually shows most of them. They don't do a generic attack animation, and then, it's just a random equipable thing. Like, this was pretty good for RPGs too, because every move actually looked different.
Right, they did. Yeah, no, they were very well animated. Almost every move felt distinct, and this game also had also kind of introduced using jump and hammer attacks, which again, Paper Mario was entirely based around. And then we had the brand new original characters like Mallow, who could attack with these weather-based moves, and then we had Geno, who had these stellar, if you will, attacks, which were just fantastic. And both of them, both these characters are beloved by fans of the game. I think Geno in particular, as I was kind of commenting on earlier. And these were some of the first truly original characters we'd seen. I think part of the reason why they stick with people is because they again existed in an era in which Mario wasn't fleshed out. These are the first original characters we had that felt like actual beings, and they existed in this real, well-realized world of Mario. And I think that's why, I feel like people who don't want Geno in Smash, will just take every opportunity to crap all over him. And I think they kind of ignore, the history. It's more than just the characters. The game he was part of, the era in which he existed. And I guess if you play Mario RPG these days, I can see why a lot of that may be lost on people. But I think for people who do like Geno, like myself, I think it's a kind of you had to be there time for it. You had to be there for that moment in order to fully appreciate what Geno was part of, what Mario RPG is, and how we wouldn't, Mario may not be what it is today without this game. I certainly the RPG series wouldn't, but I feel even to an extent the actual Mario games, I feel the way they fleshed out the world here certainly made Nintendo think about, at least consider how that might be the case for, the mainline Marios as well.
Yeah. I would say for better or for worse, whichever way you want to take it, because some could argue it was this game and a couple others after it where they were some of the last games where we saw truly original species and characters all over the place before they started kind of returning to form a little bit, and that's okay, because it's great that they took the opportunity to, whether it was Nintendo going in with it or Square Enix going in with it, they still managed to come out with something that works really nicely. And I know, Geno and Mallow haven't really come back at all, and I know even, Paper Mario characters, only a couple of them have ever really come back again. But I think they really set up something with Mario RPG that it would be incredible if they ever even referenced more of it. Like, I don't know, they just name drop somewhere in like a little, I don't know, like a Mario Kart course. Maybe like Cloud Top Cruise 2. They like name drop a reference to where Mallow comes from. Or something. Like,
instead of Rainbow Road, give us Star Road, right? You know, have Geno as a constellation or something. So.
Perfect.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it'd be nice if Nintendo referenced it. I mean, I myself would love if they ever actually made a proper Mario RPG too, whether in the exact same vein or just a continuation of the story and characters. I think that could be neat. I think there's still potential for it, especially with the fact that we effectively only have one RPG series at this time, being the Paper Mario series, and even that, some might argue, is barely an RPG these days. So if there were ever an opportunity, now might be it. Because I think there is still, like, going back to it today, again, I didn't play a whole lot before this discussion, but the battle system is still fun, like, it still feels like a classic RPG, but it's, without the, added complexity that a lot of them have had, even, to this day, and it's just, like, deep enough that it's, that it keeps you engaged without making you feel like you're being pandered to. At least for me, like, maybe I'm one who tends to like simpler things when it comes to RPGs anyway, so maybe that's just me speaking. But what I like about this game is they made the combat fun. It's engaging, it's fun, it feels impactful, like landing one of those perfectly timed attacks feels great, especially with how some of them can be chained together, like the jump attack, like one of them in particular, you can go on, I think, basically forever, up to 100. I was never that good. There's a challenge in the game. We have to do, like, I think 100 of them to get, like, a special scarf. I can never do it. I always get tripped up around, like, 23, 24, and I have no idea how people make it all the way.
I mean, 23, 24 is still honestly pretty good for something like that.
It does a lot of damage.
Yeah, and I think something else I love, because you mentioned how it really does kind of lean into the traditional RPG sense while also putting a spin on it with, like, the action commands. It really does feel like that perfect blend, whereas even what they tried doing next with the Paper Mario games, the Mario and Luigi games, there's definitely a different step with those that set them more as their own thing. Whereas with Mario RPG, it really is such a good blend between Mario and RPGs. And I know so many people that are like big time like RPG fans, that they'll play most turn-based RPGs, and Mario RPG was super easy for them to just jump into and keep going with and adjust to its own unique things really quickly, and the strategies they tend to go for in these games work out very well. And the game really accounts for that sort of stuff too. Like, there's, what is the item? I think it's called the Lazy Shell. There's this item that I think it's specifically you give it to Peach or something, and it makes her like the best character in the game.
Oh, she's practically invincible.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it makes her like I used to call her Peach the Battle Tank. In fact, I think I have my original website. I think it's still online. CNT Network, Cheats and Tricks Network, I think, or Codes and Tricks. I think I had that as like a little trick in there, being Peach the Battle Tank, because if you equip it on her, like, not only is she pretty much indestructible, but she has all the best healing abilities, including the group hug to heal everyone, or the comeback where you can just revive a dead opponent. And although the Lazy Shell, the downside is I think it cuts her attack or her magic.
It cuts her attack down to 1, I think, yeah.
Or I think by half or something.
Or maybe by half, yeah. Maybe not down to 1. I think that's just how much damage she takes, but
it's still effective enough that it doesn't even matter. And you combine that, like, especially if you combine that with the special abilities of, like, in my case, I think it was Bowser and Mario. You just had, like, an unstoppable team that was perfect for, like, taking on the final boss of the game. And even for taking on the special Final Fantasy boss, which was such a fun twist, by the way, where there is literally a boss that's basically a Final Fantasy boss, completed the music, the visual style, just everything about it screams Final Fantasy, and it is great, and it's totally optional. Like, it's fun, they just threw that in there for the heck of it.
Yeah, speaking of the music for that, as Eric mentioned, thank you Yoko Shimomura for another amazing Mario, or in general, amazing soundtrack.
Oh yeah,
Yoko Shimomura makes incredible music, and every time she's worked on Mario music, it's always been great. Mario RPG is another one of those that's so good.
I think, the music is just fantastic throughout. Like, I love, Geno's theme. Even, like, the music, like, really covers the entire spectrum. Like, there are characters in this game that get sad and depressed, and the music reflects that. It sounds really downbeat, and it kind of this game, like to my point earlier, like it evokes emotions and feelings that no Mario game had up to that point. It's like, what? Why am I having feels when playing Mario? What is this? And it's kind of neat that they were able to explore like and introduce like a whole different angle of Mario that hadn't been seen up to that point. But yeah, another great thing about this game is how it was just mixing things up constantly. Between the platforming and the battles, you had different like effectively mini games like the waterfall where you're trying to swim against it, or the barrel game where you're running uphill, or how there's like different like these just off the wall battles, like you're fighting a wedding cake at one point. And what's great about that too is that in that whole sequence, like this whole chapel sequence, which is incredible, in which I think it's Booster trying to marry Peach, there's different outcomes to that, and the photograph you end up with changes depending on the actions you performed, including one in which I think Bowser and Booster kiss, which
I think they both kiss Mario on like each side of the cheeks, which is really funny.
It's so great, and there's a variety of combinations you can get. Like the Easter eggs are just so good in this game, and I actually might need to make a cool bits about that because there's just so much to cover here. There's a character in the game who has a Game Boy at some point. You can buy the Game Boy from this character and play a game on it, like a little arcade game.
I see Eric in chat says, I remember being scared when I heard Square was doing this game. I was very intimidated by Final Fantasy games at the time, and I thought this would be too difficult for me. I could definitely understand that, because it does lean more into a traditional RPG, so, I mean, even now with the Virtual Console version, I know people that are a little worried getting into this if they're not big on RPGs, because it sounds like it'd be a bit daunting, but it balances itself really well, actually.
It does, yeah. It doesn't really. I mean, this is basically the first Mario game that required reading. But yeah, they pulled it off. Like, it really is kind of like, I would say, a near perfect mixture of the Mario platforming genre and an RPG, and they pretty much nailed it. The only major change that I would make going back, or if they were to do a remake or update of it, is I do love what they introduced in Paper Mario, which I also love obviously in Mario & Luigi, is when you like jump on an enemy, you get the first attack. That's something this game didn't have, and I wish they did. It doesn't matter whether the enemy attacks first or you. All that does is initiate a battle in either case, and that's something that I think that does feel a little bit missing in hindsight.
Man, you mentioned the idea of a remake, and I would love to see that, but I wonder how much they would change. Like, I almost wonder, would people like it, or would they be upset that it's not as faithful?
I don't know. I think this is actually a game that you could pretty smartly update without changing its core. I think the base game holds up just fine, I think. Again, I haven't played replayed the whole thing super recently, but to my memory, I think it will hold up just fine. You just update those visuals, make it widescreen, add in a few tweaks like, the being able to initiate a battle, maybe add some new content. I think it'd be okay. I think people would be fine with it. I mean, I think maybe the biggest issue is that it is very true to like a classic 16-bit RPG, but I think people are kind of hungry for that classic content these days anyway. So I think even that wouldn't be much of an issue. And it would be
to Grezzo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it would be a return to form for the Mario RPG series, if you want to call them that, because it has been a while since basically since the last Mario & Luigi, since we've had a proper Mario RPG, and there hasn't even been a brand new one of those in a while. We've been stuck with remakes the last two times, and as far as we know, there aren't any more in the works because the company is no longer in business. So
yeah, rip Alpha Dream.
I know, it's sad. So Triss, what's your favorite part about this game? Do you have like a favorite moment that sticks out to you? If you had to choose favorite character, favorite moment?
I think there's two that stick out to me very specifically. I love the whole section of when you're bringing Mallow home, and there's like the giant dodo bird that's claiming to be Prince Mallow, and it's just wacky and fun. I love that whole section. And then what's the other one? I don't remember the full. No, it's the really iconic one where but right before you get Gino, where there's I think it's like Bowyer, where he's like launching arrows into the town that are like paralyzing people.
Roseville, I think.
Yes,
Rosetown,
yes.
Rosetown, maybe.
Yeah, I love both of those. They're just really iconic, and I think they really sell what the game is about pretty well. The other one that really comes up to me is Booster's Tower.
Yeah.
That whole section with Booster is just hilarious.
And that reminds me of, first off, Booster is an amazing character. He's basically a weirder version of Wario somehow. And it's that whole thing's just really fun. Like it ends in his room where he had this box full of toys, and I think there's some character references in there. I forget what all's in there. And this game also is the one that started the trend in the Paper Mario games of you turning into an 8-bit Mario at some point. Because you go through a curtain, and you come out,
that's right.
It plays the classic music, and that's something that they carried over into the subsequent Paper Mario. So, but I think one of my overall favorite sequences, I really love almost every sequence of this game, but you had the Axem Rangers, which are a Power Rangers parody.
I completely forgot about that. They're so good.
And then they kind of spoofed on that too in, again, Paper Mario, where they had their own parody of the Ninja Turtles with the
Koopa Bros.
The Koopa Bros. Yeah.
I see there's C Tarno and Eric are all saying in chat they everyone really hopes that this game gets put on the Nintendo Switch Online for maybe the North American anniversary or just in general.
Yep.
Put it on.
I think it was put on the Super NES Classic, so it's odd that I believe, if I remember correctly.
I think it was.
Yeah, so that's a massive gap right now on Nintendo Switch Online. Dude, this game is great.
They could do it sometime this year. I would hope. Not that we're running out of SNES games to add, kind of, but I think it would be like one of the perfect games to add before moving on to N64 eventually. I love the implication. I mentioned it earlier with Bowser finds specifically someone that he remembers from his army, and they're retired here, and they're like starting a family or something like that, and Bowser wishes them well. And I mentioned that earlier, but that's such a standout point to me because it's really it does so much for Bowser's character that we never really had before, and it does well as Bowser being one of the protagonists of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you just reminded me of something involving Bowser, and that's in the Japanese version. His victory animation looks a bit different than the American version because it basically looks like he's flipping off the camera, and so they completely redid the animation in the North American version to be a little bit friendlier looking. So I thought that was funny.
That is pretty funny.
Yeah, is there anything else that stands out to you about Mario RPG, Triss, that we haven't touched on yet?
I love the uniqueness to all of like the Smithy gang in terms of their design. Like they have such a really neat theme going with all like the mechanics basically, and you know like they were made in a blacksmith. They're all weapons, and they have such a cool theme going along with them, and it's consistent throughout. And it's something that I feel doesn't get talked about too much, but I feel is really deserving because all the enemies that come from the Smithy gang, you can spot right away that they are based on the designs they have, and it's something we don't see too often. Like I would say the last time we really saw that was, or the next time we saw it rather, was in Partners in Time, Mario and Luigi with the shrooms. You can tell if something was with the shrooms or not. You know,
I love when when you go through Bowser's castle and then eventually you fight the sword, and then you get sucked into into this weird dimension where you eventually fight Smithy. But along the way, you encounter even more of his minions, including like these hammer-shaped guys and all kinds of things that are like very clearly, as you were saying, like these workers, and I love the detail too of you going through the actual factory. You see these minions being built and constructed, and then as you fight Smithy, I believe he's actually building more during the battle himself.
Yeah, they basically thought through like every little detail that nowadays, if it was in 3D, you would see like so many people like pointing out all the fun little details, but even like back then with this, they did a lot with it that a lot of people just overlook that I think is really worth taking a look at because it's just really neat.
Exactly.
And not that other games haven't gone that far with it, but it feels like this took it further than some other Mario games.
They did it first and arguably did it best in some ways, which is kind of great. That here we are 25 years later, and it seems like it still holds up remarkably well. Eric Flapjack says in the chat, Bowser being humbled and having to team up with Mario was really a sight to see. It seemed to really finally give him more of a gray area personality that carried into other games since then. Exactly, it made him more than just a one-dimensional villain. It showed a different side of him. It showed like a side that's a little bit empathetic even. There's points where he's like crying in this game. Not like seriously, not to the same degree like Mallow is. But he gets tears in his eyes, and as you kind of touched on earlier, Triss, like it is actually kind of like heartwarming at points hearing what he has to say to his own minions. As he as he comes to grasp with his own situation.
I think the only other time, there's like 2 other times I would say we really see Bowser like this again, and they're both in Paper Mario. In Super Paper Mario, where he's one of the heroes with you, and in Origami King, the newest one. I know, obviously he's one of the big playable characters in Bowser's Inside Story, but he's very much on his own side there. He doesn't even know that he's working at Mario until, like, the end of the game. Like, I don't really think that counts in the same way, because he's very much still out for himself in that case, and his own people, but it's not like he's being expressive in a way Mario can see, that he realizes at least. Whereas, in these other ones, he's purposely, like, letting the softer side of himself be seen recognizably by someone else.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. That's exactly it. So yeah, it's so fun to have the first game go this big with a story where they're already like tearing up the conventions we know of Mario in ways we didn't know we wanted, and in ways that stuck throughout the series. As you're kind of touching on, including in the most recent Mario RPG in quotes being Origami King. So. Yeah, it's kind of awesome, to see like where all that got its roots. This was the first time we were able to actually explore Peach's castle, and yeah, we would explore it in full 3D later that same year in a completely different form, of course, in Mario 64. But this was the first time we saw it in any form that had like any level of depth, and that is so cool. And I'm even reminded of a little Easter egg that snuck in there, where at some point you sneak back into, or you have to go back into Peach's room, and if you rummage through her things, she gets mad at you because you find something that's literally labeled like question mark, question mark, question mark, and it really makes you think, what did Mario just find? And Peach gets mad. She's not happy about this. So great.
Also, speaking of Peach's castle, we have to give the shout out to Peach's grandmother, who the caretaker, I think it's Peach's grandmother, who encourages Peach to go out on this adventure, and then she disguises herself as Peach to stay in the castle.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, that's so great. Oh man, and I just got reminded of something else too. So throughout the game, there's hidden question blocks everywhere. But there's one question block in the castle that you can only get at one very specific point in the game, and if you miss it, that's it. You can never get that block again. So if you're a completionist, good luck. Because it involves, there's one point in the game where a Toad walks from one side of the screen to the other, and that's it. And you have to jump on him to reach this ledge that has a question block. So it's pretty, at least it's pretty, It's kind of early into the game, I think, if I remember correctly. So you can always start over if you miss it by that point. But yeah, so I'm just trying to think of any other good memories I have of this game. But I just had a blast going through it. The ending is like 10 minutes long. Oh, there's a parade! Led by Luigi. Again, something that carries over into the subsequent games, That's something that Paper Mario had, Thousand Year Door. So
yeah.
I love the parade.
This had a lot of the origins.
It was so epic. I remember, the ending felt epic. You had, this 10-minute conclusion, and I loved it. It was great, and it just ends in a really, just a really heartfelt, cute way with, Gino returning home, I think. Just love everything about this game, so... Any other thoughts, Triss, about Mario RPG before we wrap it up on its 25th anniversary?
I think I would love to see whether it gets some sort of remake, or more realistically, it gets put on the SNES Online. I just want to see Nintendo properly recognize it again. And by which I mean, when it goes on and they acknowledge the anniversary, hopefully they acknowledge it. If not, oh well, but do a My Nintendo reward for it. Just do something neat, I don't know, a My Nintendo reward where it's just even if it's just printouts of the characters, or just something, it would be really nice to see them do that to honor a game like this that really kickstarted a whole subgenre of Mario games.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think part of the issue is that anything involving this game also requires Square's permission.
Yeah.
And we've seen how troublesome that can be, but they have pulled it off. Gino had a cameo in Superstar Saga. He's a Mii costume now in 2 Smash Brothers games. See, Tarno says get Gino in Smash. Oh, I wish. I do think the costume returning with a death kneel though for Gino in Smash this time, unfortunately. But that would be amazing. But yeah, I agree. I mean, references would be neat. I myself would truly love a full-on sequel. Bring Gino back in a Mario RPG too. Bring Mallow back. Bring them all back. Maybe make it so you can mix up the party fully this time instead of being, oh, that could be a good way to bring it, like, if they ever update this game. Make it so you can get swap Mario out of the party. Like, that's one of the downsides, I say, is you're stuck with Mario. So your pairings are a little bit limited in that sense.
So, like, change who you use in the overworld, too,
Sure.
instead of always Mario kind of thing?
Why not?
Yeah.
Actually, it'd be kind of cool. They all have their own special abilities. Maybe Peach can float. There's more sequel territory. But yeah.
Yeah, it is more sequel
Peach
stuff,
can float, you know. Gino, I don't know, can shoot his gun to stun enemies or something. Who knows?
It would be a complete reimagining. And like I said, give it to Grezzo. They did great with the Link's Awakening remake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You could do that. You can capture... We can capture the old school modeled clay look to the renders. Maybe not quite that, but...
They could go like a full-on Lego movie with this. Like, give it so like the models have like fingerprints on them and...
Oh, man.
Yeah. That'd be great. That would be great. So, any final thoughts before we finally wrap it up?
Just that I hope it comes to the SNES Online.
That'd be nice.
It better.
I hope it does. The world deserves it, especially on its 25th anniversary. Come on, it's time. People are thirsty for a full Mario RPG game. Let's give it to them in the form of one of the best, being Mario RPG. And of course, I compare it with the announcement of a sequel, which would be amazing. C. Tarno says, I was born 3 years after this game released, still haven't played it. Well, I hope we haven't spoiled it too much for you, C. Tarno, and hopefully we've appetized you just enough to go back and play it. Hopefully you get the opportunity to, because I'd love to hear your thoughts, and it's a lot of fun. And speaking of hearing thoughts, we'd love to hear all of your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about Mario RPG? Do you think it's worth revisiting? Do you think it still holds up? And did you have fun with it back in the day? If you were old enough to play it. Let us know by posting in the comments below. And with that, thank you so much for watching our 25th anniversary celebration of Super Mario RPG. Where has the time gone? Anyways, like usual, click the subscribe button and ring that bell for tons more on Mario, I guess. Less so Mario RPG, though I would love for that to be the case. And everything else, Gino and Nintendo as well. We'll catch you later, everyone. Bye.